You can't block a public road. I'll have the county tear that wall down.
That's what the HOA vice president screamed at me through a chain link fence, 50 feet from the 8-foot-tall reinforced concrete wall I'd built across my own ranch road, after she spent 5 months driving her white Escalade through my locked gate like it was a pool noodle. Not a county road, on my ranch, on my deeded property where my Hereford cattle graze. She cracked my gate posts. She snapped my padlocks. She got my bull loose near a residential street. And when I asked her to stop, she had the HOA send me a letter demanding I hand over my land. So I stopped replacing padlocks and started pouring concrete. What I put up didn't just stop her Escalade. It ended her position, her credibility, and her address in the neighborhood. Would you have kept replacing hardware, or would you have built the wall? My name is Wyatt Callahan. I'm 51 years old, and I run a 200-acre cattle and hay operation outside of Mays County, Oklahoma, about 45 minutes east of Tulsa. My father bought this land in 1971 from a retired oilman who'd lost interest in agriculture after the wells dried up. 3 generations of Callahans have baled hay on these fields, run Hereford cattle through these pastures, and maintained every inch of road, fence, and water line on this property with our own hands, our own money, and our own sweat. The ranch sits along the southern bank of Saline Creek, and for decades, there was nothing around us but timber, pasture, and a few other family operations spread across the hills. That changed in 2019, when a development company called Crestview Holdings bought 170 acres of old soybean fields directly to my north and built a subdivision called Timber Falls, 216 homes on quarter-acre lots with a clubhouse, a splash pad, and an HOA that regulated everything from fence color to how many seconds your garage door could stay open. The only public road into Timber Falls was a 2-lane county road called Creek Hollow Road, which wound north along the ridge before connecting to the state highway about 5 miles out. During school drop-off and afternoon commute, that road backed up for 25 minutes easy. But there was another way, a gravel ranch road that cut through the southwest corner of my property, crossed a shallow drainage ditch, and connected to a service drive that dead-ended at the back of the Timber Falls parking area near the splash pad. That ranch road was mine, deeded, surveyed, inside my fence line. I graded it myself with a box blade twice a year. I had a heavy steel tubular gate at the entrance, 14 feet wide, set between 2 cedar posts sunk 3 feet into concrete, with a chain and padlock closure and a metal sign that read, "Private property, no trespassing." That road existed for one reason, so I could move hay wagons and cattle between my south and north pastures without driving on the county road. It had never been public. It had never been shared. It was as much mine as the front porch of my house. The HOA vice president was a woman named Donna Haverfield, late 40s, always dressed like she was heading to a real estate open house. Drove a white Cadillac Escalade that she kept so clean you could check your teeth in the bumper. She and her husband, Kevin, had moved to Timber Falls from Broken Arrow in 2020, and within 18 months, Donna had talked her way onto the HOA board and installed herself as vice president, with the relentless energy of someone who believed every neighborhood needed a manager, and that she was uniquely qualified to be it. Donna had a talent for framing her personal preferences as community priorities. If Donna wanted a new speed bump, it was a safety initiative. If Donna wanted a neighbor's basketball hoop removed, it was an aesthetic compliance issue. And if Donna wanted a shortcut through my ranch to avoid 25 minutes of traffic, well, that was an alternative access opportunity. The trouble began in March of 2022, and it didn't stop until I put up something that couldn't be argued with, driven through, or ignored. The first time it happened was a Friday afternoon in March. I was in the barn replacing a hydraulic hose on my hay rake when I heard the clang of metal on metal coming from the south gate. I walked outside and saw a white Escalade barreling down my ranch road at maybe 35 miles an hour, trailing a cloud of red Oklahoma dust. The gate was swinging wide open, the padlock dangling by one shackle, the chain twisted and hanging from the post like somebody had hit it with a truck, which, as it turned out, is exactly what had happened. I jumped in my side-by-side and followed the dust trail. By the time I reached the north end of the ranch road, the Escalade had already cut through the drainage crossing and disappeared onto the Timber Falls service drive. I could see it parked near the splash pad, gleaming white against the asphalt, not a scratch on it. My gate, on the other hand, had a bent latch plate and a padlock that would never close again. I wrote down the plate number, drove back to the house, and called the Mays County Sheriff's Office. A deputy came out the next morning, took a report, looked at the gate, and said what deputies always say. Without catching them in the act, it's your word against theirs. Get a camera. I spent the weekend asking around. A neighbor who worked part-time mowing lawns in Timber Falls told me the white Escalade belonged to the HOA vice president, Donna Haverfield, who lived on Timber Ridge Lane. I drove over Monday morning and knocked on her door. Kevin answered, pleasant enough. Called Donna, who appeared in the doorway with a phone in one hand and a smoothie in the other. I told her who I was. I told her someone in a white Escalade had driven through my locked ranch gate and crossed my pasture. I told her the gate was damaged, and I expected it not to happen again. Donna's eyes didn't change. She said, "Oh, that gravel road? Several of us have been using it on Fridays to skip the backup on Creek Hollow. Honestly, I assumed it was a county maintenance road. There's no sign or anything." There was a sign. I'd bolted it to the gate myself. It said, "Private property, no trespassing," in letters you could read from 50 yards. I told her so. She waved her smoothie like she was brushing away a fly and said, "Well, maybe consider putting up a bigger sign. Or better yet, have you thought about letting the neighborhood use it? We'd be happy to chip in for gravel. It'd be a win-win." I told her there was no win-win. The road was mine. The gate was mine. The land was mine. And if the Escalade came through again, I'd be filing more than a report. She smiled, the tight, practiced smile of someone who's already decided you're an obstacle, not a person, and said, "I'll bring it up with the board. Maybe we can formalize something." There was nothing to formalize. I went home, replaced the padlock with a heavier one, added a second chain across the gate, and ordered a cellular trail camera from a supply store in Pryor. I mounted it on a T-post 10 feet from the gate, angled to capture the full width of the road. The second incident came 12 days later, another Friday. The trail camera caught everything. The white Escalade pulled up to the gate at 4:47 p.m. It idled for maybe 5 seconds. Then it rolled forward, pushed through the gate, both chains stretching and snapping, the padlock shearing clean off the shackle, and accelerated across my pasture without slowing down. The dust trail hung in the air for 30 seconds after the vehicle disappeared. I saved the footage to my phone, to a USB drive, and to cloud storage. Then I replaced the chains and the padlock for the third time. $110 in hardware I shouldn't have needed. I wrote a certified letter to Donna Haverfield, demanding she cease all unauthorized entry onto my property and reimburse me for the cumulative gate damage. I sent it priority mail. 5 days later, I received a response. Not from Donna, but from the Timber Falls HOA on official letterhead, signed by Donna as vice president and co-signed by the board president, a man named Gerald Pace. The letter stated that the HOA board had reviewed the access situation and was formally requesting that I grant a public easement across my ranch road to alleviate traffic congestion and improve emergency response capability for the Timber Falls community. The letter concluded by warning that if I declined, the board would pursue all appropriate legal and governmental channels to secure community access. I stood at my kitchen table and read that letter twice. Then I set it down, picked up my phone, and called a property attorney in Pryor named Jack Hargrove. Jack Hargrove had practiced land and property law in Mays County for 28 years. He'd handled boundary disputes, mineral rights cases, timber easements, and more fence line arguments than he could count. He wore a Stetson to court and kept a copy of the Oklahoma statutes on a shelf next to a signed Merle Haggard album. I'd used him for a fence line survey dispute in 2017 and trusted his judgment absolutely. I met him at his office the next morning with the HOA letter, the certified letter I'd sent to Donna, the sheriff's report, and the trail camera footage loaded on my phone. He watched the footage twice, the first time silently, the second time shaking his head. He said, "Wyatt, this woman is committing criminal trespass under Oklahoma Statute Title 21, Section 1835. She's damaging your property, entering without permission, and doing it repeatedly. The HOA's easement demand has zero legal standing. Your road isn't platted, isn't dedicated, and isn't subject to any recorded easement. There's no prescriptive basis because the subdivision's only been there 3 years, and prescriptive easement in Oklahoma requires 15 years of continuous, open, hostile use. She's playing chicken with the man who owns the road. Jack drafted a response letter that was 3 pages of precisely referenced legal language. It cited my deed, the Mays County survey records, the Oklahoma Property Code, the criminal trespass statute, and the trail camera evidence. The letter demanded that the HOA withdraw its easement request, that Donna Haverfield cease all unauthorized entry, and that the board reimburse me $470 in documented gate damage. It stated that any legal action by the HOA would be met with counterclaims for trespass, property destruction, harassment, and attorney's fees. Jack sent it certified to Donna, personally, to the HOA board president Gerald Pace, and to the HOA's management company, a firm called Prairie Ridge Management out of Tulsa. 2 weeks passed. I got a response from Prairie Ridge's attorney, a woman named Shannon Gilchrist. The letter was measured but non-committal. It said the board was evaluating its options, and that initial research suggests potential avenues for establishing shared access. It proposed a mediation meeting to discuss mutually beneficial access arrangements. Jack called Gilchrist directly. He told me afterward that she was professional, careful, and clearly not enthusiastic about her client's position. He told her the easement theory was dead before it started, that the trail camera footage would play well in front of a judge, and that if the HOA filed suit, we'd make the counterclaim bigger than the original action. She said she'd advise the board. But Donna didn't stop. The trail camera caught her 3 more times in April, always on Fridays, always between 4:30 and 5 o'clock, always in the white Escalade. She'd slowed down her approach. Instead of ramming the gate at speed, she'd inch forward until the bumper made contact, then accelerate in a short burst that popped the chain loose. It was more calculated now, deliberate rather than reckless, but the result was the same. Broken hardware, open gate, tire tracks across my pasture. And then the copycats started. Other Timber Falls residents discovered the shortcut. By late April, the trail camera was capturing 4 to 6 vehicles a day using my ranch road. Sedans, SUVs, a pickup or 2. None of them had permission. Most of them left the gate open. My Herefords got loose 3 times in 2 weeks. The 3rd time, a 2-year-old bull ended up on the Timber Falls service drive, standing in the middle of the road like a traffic island, while a woman in a minivan honked at him from 10 feet away. A loose bull near a residential street isn't a joke. It's a 1,500-pound animal with horns, poor eyesight, and no understanding of traffic signals. If he'd charged that minivan, someone could have been killed. My cattle insurance agent called me that week and said, "Wyatt, if one of your animals hurts someone because that gate keeps getting opened, the liability is going to land on you. You need to shut that road down permanently." He was right. Replacing chains and padlocks every week was like putting band-aids on a broken dam. I needed something final, something that no Escalade, no SUV, and no amount of HOA letterhead could push through. I needed a wall. I spent the first 3 weeks of May planning. Not the kind of planning you do over coffee. The kind where you sit at your desk with a property survey, a legal pad, and a stack of building codes thick enough to stop a door. First, I pulled my original deed from the Mays County Clerk's office and had Jack Hargrove verify it against the most recent survey, which had been done in 2017 during the fence line dispute. My property boundary was crisp and unambiguous. The ranch road ran entirely within my deeded acreage, from the south gate all the way to the drainage crossing. There was no easement, no utility, no access, no drainage, nothing. The Mays County Assessor's records confirm the road as a private agricultural improvement, taxed as part of my ranch parcel. Second, I reviewed the county road records and the Timber Falls subdivision plat. Creek Hollow Road was county maintained. The service drive at the back of Timber Falls was a private road built by Crestview Holdings and maintained by the HOA under their plat agreement. But nothing in the plat referenced my land. Nothing in the county records showed any connection between the subdivision's internal roads and my ranch road. The 2 properties were as legally separate as 2 countries divided by a river. Third, I called the Mays County Building Inspector's office. I spoke with a man named Hal Prescott, who'd been reviewing permits in the county for over 20 years. I told him I wanted to build a reinforced masonry wall across the entrance of my ranch road, entirely within my property line. He asked for dimensions. I said 20 feet wide, 8 feet tall, 12-inch reinforced concrete block on a continuous footing below frost line. He paused and said, "That's a serious structure." I said, "That's the point." He told me I'd need a structural engineer's stamp, a site plan, and a setback verification. He said if everything was on my property and met code, the permit was straightforward. Fourth, I called my brother-in-law, Travis Murdoch. Travis ran a masonry and concrete business out of Wagner that had been building retaining walls, foundations, and commercial structures across eastern Oklahoma for 15 years. I told him what I needed. He said, "You want a wall across a road?" I said, "I want a wall that a Cadillac Escalade can't push through, climb over, or negotiate around." He said, "Sounds like you've got a neighbor problem." I said, "I've got a solution. I just need someone to pour it." Travis drove out to the ranch on a Saturday and walked the site. The ranch road was about 20 feet wide, where it met the south property line. He recommended a wall spanning the full width, 20 feet, with 2-foot extensions on each side, anchoring into my existing fence. 8 feet tall, 12-inch CMU blocks, every core filled with rebar and concrete, on a footing 3 feet deep and 2 feet wide. He estimated the finished weight at about 24,000 pounds. I asked the cost. He said $9,200, including materials, labor, and equipment rental. I asked the timeline. He said 3 days for footing, 2 days for block work, 1 day for finishing and cap. I said, "Start as soon as the permit clears." I hired a structural engineer in Tulsa named Rebecca Winters, who drew up the plans, stamped the specs, and submitted them to the county. The permit was approved in 8 business days. Hal Prescott called me to say it was ready. He said, "Mr. Callahan, I've processed a lot of permits, but this is the first wall designed specifically to stop an HOA." I told him it was designed to protect my livestock. He said, "Of course it is," and I could hear the grin. Before construction started, I had one more piece of business. I drove to the Mays County Sheriff's Office and filed a formal criminal trespass complaint against Donna Haverfield. I brought every trail camera clip, 18 recordings in total, each time-stamped and backed up on 2 drives, the certified letters, the gate damage photos, and the sheriff's initial report. The deputy who took the complaint reviewed the footage and said, "Mr. Callahan, this is solid evidence, but the DA will want to see a pattern, and you've got one." He gave me a case file number and told me to keep documenting. The construction date was set for the first week of June. Travis ordered materials. I arranged for my neighbor Bud to handle the cattle for a week. Everything was locked in. The wall went up on a Monday. Travis arrived at dawn with a crew of 5, a concrete pump truck, a flatbed stacked with CMU blocks, and enough rebar to reinforce a parking garage. They'd poured the footing the previous Wednesday, 3 feet deep, 2 feet wide, running the full 20 feet plus extensions, and it had cured over the weekend under the Oklahoma sun, hard as limestone. Block work started at 7. Travis's crew moved with the rhythm of men who'd been laying masonry their whole working lives. They set the first course on a thick mortar bed, checked level and plumb on every unit, and filled each core with rebar and concrete as they progressed. By lunchtime, the wall was 4 feet tall. By late afternoon, it was past 6 feet. They quit at dark, tarped the top course, and came back Tuesday to finish. By Tuesday at 2 o'clock, the wall was done. 8 feet tall, 20 feet wide, 12-inch reinforced CMU, every core filled solid, topped with a poured concrete cap that gave the structure a clean, deliberate edge. Travis had applied a light broom finish to the face, nothing decorative, just enough texture to show the wall was intentional, engineered, and permanent. The mortar joints were tight and consistent, running in clean horizontal lines across the gray face like ruled paper. I'd had Travis build a 3-foot-wide pedestrian passage on the right end, fitted with a heavy steel door and a commercial-grade deadbolt. The opening was big enough for a person on foot or a four-wheeler, but too narrow for any standard vehicle. I kept both keys, one on my ranch ring, one in the safe at the house. On the front face of the wall, centered at eye level, I mounted a sign. White aluminum, black lettering, commercially printed. Private property, no vehicular access. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Mays County case file number MC-2022-03641. That case file number was real. Jack Hargrove had suggested putting it on the sign. He said, "Nothing makes an HOA board member reconsider their life choices faster than a real law enforcement file number staring back at them from a concrete wall." Travis stepped back and surveyed the finished structure. He crossed his arms, tilted his head, and said, "Wyatt, I've built retaining walls for highway overpasses that weren't this solid. Nobody's driving through that." I shook his hand, wrote him a check, and watched him pull away in a cloud of June dust. That evening, I sat on the tailgate of my truck 50 feet from the wall and drank a beer. 24,000 pounds of reinforced masonry stood between my cattle pasture and the world that had been trying to drive through it. The wall didn't negotiate. It didn't swing open. It didn't care about traffic congestion or community pathways or laminated spreadsheets. It just stood there, 8 feet tall and absolutely certain of itself. And for the first time in 3 months, so did I. The wall was built, but I knew Donna Haverfield wasn't the kind of person who accepted a concrete answer, literally or figuratively. She was the kind who saw a wall and scheduled a subcommittee to discuss its removal. So I spent the next 10 days preparing for every possible counterattack. First, I organized my documentation into what Jack Hargrove called a litigation-ready file. Every trail camera recording, 18 clips in total, was downloaded, time-stamped, and stored on 2 separate USB drives, a cloud backup, and a physical hard drive locked in my gun safe. I printed high-resolution still frames from the 8 clearest recordings, each showing the white Escalade at a different stage, approaching the gate, making contact, pushing through, and driving across my pasture. I arranged them chronologically in a binder with labeled dividers. The binder told a story that any judge, jury, or county commissioner could follow without a single word of explanation. Second, I compiled a complete financial ledger. Padlock and chain replacements, 5 sets totaling $190. Gatepost repairs, $280 in materials and a full day of labor. Trail camera and cellular plan, $240. Structural engineering fee, $1,100. Building permit, $275. Wall construction, $9,200. Jack Hargrove's legal fees to date, $4,100. Total cost of defending my own property from one woman's Friday shortcut, $15,385. I typed it into a spreadsheet, printed it, and added it to the binder. Third, I prepared what Jack called the neighborhood letter. It was addressed to every homeowner in Timber Falls, all 216 addresses. The letter was calm, factual, and precise. It identified me as the owner of the adjacent ranch, explained that my private road had been used without permission for months, stated that the HOA vice president had personally damaged my gate on repeated occasions, noted the criminal trespass complaint on file, and explained that the wall had been constructed to prevent further unauthorized access and protect my livestock. I included 3 photographs: the broken gate, a trail camera still of the Escalade mid-impact, and the completed wall. The letter ended with one sentence: "I have no quarrel with the residents of Timber Falls. My quarrel is with the person who decided my land was her shortcut." I printed 220 copies. I didn't mail them. Not yet. I'd learned that timing matters more than firepower. Hold your ammunition until the target gives you a reason to use it. Fourth, I called my insurance agent and had the wall documented as a permanent ranch improvement. He updated my agricultural property rider and classified the wall as a livestock security and boundary structure. That classification was deliberate. If Donna or the HOA tried to argue the wall was punitive or retaliatory, my insurance records would show it was a safety installation with a legitimate agricultural purpose. Fifth, I installed 3 additional trail cameras, 2 on the wall itself, angled in opposite directions, and 1 on a post near the drainage crossing to capture anyone approaching from the Timber Falls side. I also mounted a motion-activated LED floodlight on a pole near the pedestrian gate. Everything had cellular connectivity and cloud backup. If anyone so much as leaned against that wall, I'd have video of it on my phone within seconds. Sixth, I talked to Bud Olson, my neighbor to the west. Bud had farmed 160 acres in Mays County since the Carter administration, and had watched the Timber Falls development go up with the same enthusiasm most farmers reserve for hailstorms. He'd had his own run-ins with subdivision residents. Someone had left his cattle gate open twice in the fall of 2021, and he was fully on my side. He agreed to serve as a witness if anything went to court, and said he'd keep an eye on my south fence line when I wasn't around. Finally, I sat down with Jack and mapped out the legal chessboard. Jack identified 3 moves the HOA might make. 1. File for a prescriptive easement, which would fail immediately because Oklahoma requires 15 years of open, continuous, hostile use, and the subdivision was 3 years old. 2. Petition the county to condemn a right-of-way across my property, which would require proof of public necessity and just compensation, and the county had no appetite for condemning a working ranch for a subdivision's convenience. 3. Sue me for nuisance, claiming the wall disrupted established traffic patterns, which Jack called legally imaginative and factually absurd, because you can't claim nuisance over losing access you never legally had. I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt since March: steady. Not the steadiness of resignation, the steadiness of a man standing behind a 24,000-pound wall, with a binder full of evidence and an attorney who knew the law cold. The wall had been standing for 11 days when Donna made her first move. I was mending fence along the east pasture when my phone buzzed with a trail camera alert. I opened the app and watched live. Donna's white Escalade was parked about 20 feet from the wall, engine running. She was standing in front of the wall with her phone raised, taking photos of the wall, the sign, the pedestrian gate, the cameras. She walked the full width of the structure, touching the surface at 2 points, like she was testing whether it was actually solid. Then she walked back to the Escalade, got in, and sat there for nearly 4 minutes before driving away. 72 hours later, I received a certified letter from the Timber Falls HOA. It was 4 pages, printed on HOA letterhead, signed by Donna Haverfield as vice president, and co-signed by Gerald Pace as board president. The letter made 5 demands. First, it demanded I remove the wall within 45 days, calling it an unauthorized and hostile obstruction of a recognized community thoroughfare. Second, it demanded I restore the ranch road to its prior accessible condition. Third, it claimed the HOA had engaged a licensed surveyor to investigate the precise boundary delineation in the area of the disputed access point. Fourth, it stated the HOA was consulting with traffic safety engineers regarding the impact of the road closure on emergency vehicle response times. Fifth, it warned that failure to comply would result in the HOA pursuing all legal remedies available, including but not limited to injunctive relief, damages, and petition for condemnation. I called Jack. He read the letter over the phone. When he finished, he was quiet for 3 seconds, then said, "Wyatt, this letter cites exactly 0 statutes, 0 case law, and 0 legal authority for any of these demands. It references a recognized community thoroughfare. There is no such legal concept in Oklahoma property law. It threatens condemnation without any standing to initiate condemnation proceedings, which in Oklahoma can only be brought by a governmental entity or a utility with eminent domain authority. An HOA cannot condemn private land. This isn't a legal document. It's a wish list with a signature." Jack drafted a 4-page response. It cited my deed with recording number, the Mays County survey, the building permit for the wall, the Oklahoma statutory provisions on boundary structures and agricultural fencing, the criminal trespass complaint and case file number, and 18 trail camera recordings documenting unauthorized vehicular entry by the HOA vice president. The letter concluded by stating that any legal action would trigger counterclaims for trespass, property damage, harassment, intentional interference with agricultural operations, and attorney's fees. It also noted that all trail camera evidence had been preserved and was available to the Mays County District Attorney upon request. Jack added one more line at the end, a line he said he reserved for cases where the other side was operating on pure delusion. The line read, "We invite the board to consult independent legal counsel before committing further resources to a position that is without factual or legal foundation." We sent the letter by certified mail to Donna, Gerald Pace, and Prairie Ridge Management. Then we waited. The HOA's surveyor appeared 3 days later. I spotted him from the barn, a man in an orange vest with surveying equipment set up near the Timber Falls service drive, sighting toward my property line. He worked for about 4 hours. I didn't approach him, didn't interfere, and didn't say a word. I let the trail cameras do the watching. 10 days later, Greg Mitchell from Prairie Ridge Management called me. He was professional and measured. He said the surveyor's report confirmed that the wall was located entirely within the Callahan property boundary, and that no encroachment or boundary discrepancy was identified. He said the board was reassessing its position and asked if I'd be willing to attend a facilitated discussion. I told him I'd attend a facilitated discussion when the HOA reimbursed me for the gate damage, when Donna Haverfield acknowledged in writing that my road was private property, and when the board withdrew its demand letter. Greg was silent for a moment, then said, "I understand, Mr. Callahan. I'll communicate your position." That night, I walked out to the wall in the dark. The floodlight kicked on as I approached, throwing a cone of white light across the concrete face. The sign was clean. The cameras blinked green. The wall stood there the way only 24,000 pounds of steel and concrete can stand, without apology, without negotiation, without a single inch of give. Donna's next move was political. I expected legal. She went public instead. She organized a petition among Timber Falls residents, calling on the Mays County Commissioners to condemn a public right-of-way across my ranch road. The petition argued that Creek Hollow Road was critically overburdened, that response times for emergency services are compromised by the lack of secondary access, and that the adjacent agricultural property contains an existing improved road suitable for public use. She collected 129 signatures in 10 days and submitted the petition to the county clerk's office with a 3-page cover letter requesting an expedited hearing. The petition made the Mays County Gazette. The headline read, "Timber Falls HO petitions county for alternative road access through adjacent ranch." The article was factual, but framed the issue as a traffic safety concern. It quoted Donna saying, "This is about the safety of 216 families. One property owner should not be able to block access that could save lives in an emergency." She came across as a civic-minded advocate. I came across as the rancher with the wall. Jack called me the morning the article published. He said, "Don't respond to the paper. Don't call the reporter. Don't post anything online. We present our case at the hearing and nowhere else. The commissioners aren't going to condemn your ranch road for a subdivision that has a perfectly functional county road. But we need to show up prepared." The hearing was set for a Wednesday afternoon in July. The Mays County Commissioners met in the county courthouse in Pryor, a red brick building with tall windows and the kind of air conditioning that worked when it felt like it. I arrived early in clean jeans, boots, and a collared shirt. Jack wore a blazer over his usual denim, which for him was the equivalent of a 3-piece suit. Donna arrived with a delegation: Gerald Pace, 2 other board members, Shannon Gilchrist, the HOA's attorney, and about 40 Timber Falls residents carrying printed signs that read, "Safety Access Now," and "Two Roads Save Lives." They filled one side of the chamber like a neighborhood watch meeting that had gotten ambitious. On my side, it was me, Jack, Bud Olson, and a man named Dr. Russell Kemp, a retired large animal veterinarian from Chouteau, whom Jack had asked to testify about the hazards of mixing residential traffic with active livestock operations. The county commissioner chairing the hearing, a woman named June Whitfield, called the session to order and asked Shannon Gilchrist to present the petition. Gilchrist was polished. She described the traffic congestion on Creek Hollow Road, cited hypothetical emergency response delays, displayed a color-coded map with the proposed access route, and argued that condemnation was warranted under Oklahoma's eminent domain statutes for public health and safety purposes. When Gilchrist sat down, Commissioner Whitfield turned to Jack and said, "Mr. Hargrove, your response." Jack stood up. He didn't rush. He never did. He spoke for 15 minutes. He presented the deed. He presented the survey. He presented the building permit. Then he played the trail camera footage, 3 clips, selected for maximum clarity, showing Donna's Escalade approaching the gate, pushing through, and driving across my pasture. The room went quiet. Several Timber Falls residents turned to look at Donna, who was studying her phone. Then Jack made the argument. He said, "Commissioner Whitfield, This is not a public safety petition. Creek Hollow Road handles its design capacity. The Mays County Emergency Services Director, who is not present because the county did not identify any response time deficiency, has never requested alternative access through this property. What you are looking at is a petition organized by the same individual who has been criminally trespassing on my client's property for 5 months, destroying his gate and using her HOA position to repackage her personal convenience as a community emergency. He paused. Then he said, "If this commission condemns a working cattle ranch road that has been in the Callahan family for 51 years so that a subdivision built 3 years ago can skip 25 minutes of traffic, it will be the most expensive shortcut in Mays County history, and it will set a precedent that every rancher and farmer in this county should be terrified of." Dr. Kemp testified for 6 minutes about what happens when a 1,500-pound Hereford bull encounters a sedan at 40 miles an hour. He used the phrase catastrophic biomechanical impact and described a case from Craig County where a loose bull killed a driver and totaled 2 vehicles. Several Timber Falls residents shifted in their seats. Commissioner Whitfield conferred with the other 2 commissioners for less than 5 minutes. She denied the petition. She cited insufficient public necessity, the absence of any recorded easement or right-of-way, the availability of the existing county road, and, she added this last, looking directly at Donna, the troubling circumstance that the primary petitioner appears to be the principal unauthorized user of the property in question. Donna's expression didn't change. It froze. Gerald Pace stared at the table. Gilchrist packed her briefcase without a word. The Timber Falls residents filed out silently, their signs folded under their arms. The commissioner's ruling landed like a hammer on an anvil. What followed was the sound it made, echoing through the neighborhood. The Mays County Gazette ran the story that Friday with the headline, "County Denies Timber Falls Road Petition. Commissioner cites HOA VP's trespassing record." The article included Commissioner Whitfield's closing statement and a still frame from the trail camera footage. Donna's white Escalade mid-collision with my ranch gate, the chain visibly snapping, dust kicked up around the bumper. The image was grainy enough to feel raw and clear enough to be undeniable. The article spread through Timber Falls like a grass fire in August. It hit the neighborhood Facebook group within hours. It landed on Nextdoor by that evening. Neighbors who'd signed the petition under the assumption it was a straightforward traffic safety initiative now realized they'd put their names on a document orchestrated by the woman who'd been breaking a rancher's gate every Friday for 5 months. That's when I mailed the letter. 216 copies, each one hand-addressed, each one carrying a first-class stamp. I dropped them at the Pryor post office on a Thursday. By Saturday morning, my phone was ringing with calls and texts from Timber Falls residents I'd never met. A man named Ray Donahue called first. Ray was a retired Army colonel who'd moved to Timber Falls in 2021. He'd signed the petition because Donna had told him, personally, at a neighborhood cookout, that my ranch road was an old county road that one landowner had illegally blocked. It wasn't an old county road. It had never been a county road. She'd fabricated the entire premise. Ray was not a man who tolerated being lied to. He said, "Mr. Callahan, I signed that petition based on false information provided by someone I trusted as a board officer. I owe you an apology, and I intend to make sure this gets corrected." He asked to see the wall. I said he was welcome. He drove out Sunday morning, stood in front of it for a full minute, ran his hand across the concrete and said, "Outstanding fortification, Mr. Callahan. That's a wall with purpose." Ray became the catalyst. Over the next 2 weeks, he organized a group of 43 Timber Falls homeowners who demanded a special meeting to address the HOA board's conduct. Under the Timber Falls bylaws, a petition signed by 15% of homeowners, 33 signatures, could compel a special meeting. Ray had 43. He submitted the petition to Prairie Ridge Management and CC'd every board member. The special meeting was held on a Tuesday evening in the Timber Falls clubhouse. I wasn't invited. It was an internal HOA proceeding, and I wasn't a member. But Ray called me the next morning and gave me a full account. The clubhouse was packed. Over 150 residents attended. Donna sat at the front table with Gerald Pace and the 2 other board members, her notes arranged in color-coded folders. She tried to open the meeting with an agenda, a printed agenda she'd distributed at the door. But the room overruled her within 3 minutes. Ray spoke first. He stood at the back of the room and read Commissioner Whitfield's ruling in its entirety. When he reached the part about the primary petitioner being the principal unauthorized user, a woman in the third row said out loud, "She was the one driving through?" Then a man named Curtis Howard stood up. Curtis was a Timber Falls board member who had co-signed the original demand letter to me. He looked directly at Donna and said, "I signed that letter because you told the board the road was a shared access point with an informal usage history. You told us the property owner had been notified and hadn't objected. Both of those statements were false. I feel misled, and I believe this board owes Mr. Callahan a formal apology." The room erupted, not with shouting, with a controlled, simmering anger that was worse than shouting. Person after person stood up to describe what Donna had told them about the road, the petition, and the legal situation, and how all of it had been distorted, exaggerated, or completely fabricated. Gerald Pace, the board president who had co-signed the demand letter and the petition cover letter, tried to distance himself. He said he had relied on Donna's representations and regretted the board's involvement in the access dispute. His statement satisfied no one. Ray told him, "You signed the letters, Gerald. Your name is on the petition. Reliance isn't an excuse, it's a confession." The no confidence vote was called by Ray at 8:47 p.m. Under the bylaws, it required a majority of members present. The vote was 119 to 28. Donna Haverfield was removed as vice president. Gerald Pace was removed as president in a separate vote, 104 to 43. Donna stood up, gathered her color-coded folders into a leather tote bag, and walked out of the clubhouse without speaking. Kevin followed, 2 steps behind, his jaw tight and his eyes on the floor. The door closed behind them, and the room broke into applause that Ray said lasted nearly 2 minutes. The weeks after the vote were the quietest my ranch had been since before Timber Falls broke ground. Ray Donahue was elected interim HOA president. His first official act was to send me a formal written apology on behalf of the Timber Falls board. The letter acknowledged that the HOA had acted on false information, that the demands regarding my property were without legal basis, and that the board regretted the damage, expense, and disruption I had been subjected to. It included a check for $2,200, covering the gate damage, the padlock replacements, and a portion of my legal fees. It wasn't the full amount, but it was offered in good faith, and I accepted it the same way. Ray's second act was to create a neighbor relations committee, 3 homeowners tasked with maintaining respectful relationships with adjacent property owners. Their first resolution was a formal written acknowledgement that no public or community access right existed across my ranch road or any other neighboring private land. The resolution was recorded in the HOA minutes and posted on the neighborhood bulletin board in the clubhouse. The Mays County District Attorney reviewed my criminal trespass complaint and the trail camera evidence. He declined to pursue charges, said the public removal from the board and the resulting community accountability were adequate deterrent, but the complaint stayed on file. Jack Hargrove said that case number would follow Donna through every background check, every county records search, and every property transaction in Mays County for years. Donna and Kevin put their house on the market in late August. It sold in 5 weeks to a young family from Claremore, who, from what I hear, are pleasant, quiet, and have never once looked at my ranch road with anything resembling interest. The white Escalade disappeared from the neighborhood. One morning it was in the Haverfield driveway, and the next morning there was a for sale sign on the lawn, and the driveway was empty. Traffic on Creek Hollow Road got better on its own. The county installed a turn lane at the highway intersection in September and adjusted the signal timing at the school zone crossing. Combined, the changes cut the average backup from 25 minutes to about 10. It was a $30,000 infrastructure improvement that solved the problem Donna had tried to solve by driving through my gate. Sometimes the right answer is the boring one. Sometimes it just takes a county government that isn't being manipulated by someone with a leather tote bag and an agenda. The wall is still there, 8 feet tall, 20 feet wide, 24,000 pounds of reinforced concrete and steel sitting across my ranch road like it grew out of the Oklahoma clay. The Herefords graze right up to the base of it. The trail cameras blink green in the dark. The sign is straight, the pedestrian gate is locked, and nobody has driven through that entrance since the day the last block was set. Bud Olson comes by every couple weeks and looks at the wall the way old farmers look at a well-set fence post, with quiet satisfaction and nothing left to say. Travis brought his kids out for the 4th of July. His 9-year-old asked me if the wall was for keeping out dinosaurs. I said, something like that. One evening in late September, I was sitting on my truck tailgate near the wall, watching a thunderhead build over the hills to the west. A woman walking a golden retriever on the Timber Falls service drive stopped and looked at the wall through the chain-link fence. She called out, "Excuse me, is that the wall from the article?" I said it was. She smiled and said, "My neighbor showed me the newspaper, said a rancher stopped an HOA with concrete and a building permit." I said, "That's about the size of it." She laughed, her dog sniffed the fence post, and they walked on. I finished my coffee and watched the floodlight click on as the last daylight drained from the sky. The pasture was green. The cattle were calm. The wall was solid. And for the first time in a long time, my gate wasn't broken.
Remington walked out of that clubhouse without a word, no argument, no final statement, just a closed door and 44 neighbors sitting in the silence for about 3 seconds before Glenn started clapping. Not loud, just real. The fiber light came out that Friday. A licensed crew, proper permits, clean work. The roses went back in the same afternoon. Same variety, same spot. Darlene was there for every minute of it. And the bill, the full $4,850, got paid. Not by Callum, by the HOA that spends months assuming he wouldn't know where to look. Here's what stays with me. Callum didn't win because he was louder or angrier than Renton. He won because he read 12 words in a 1987 did that she was counting on nobody ever reading. 12 words, an easement restriction written before most of us had email. That was the whole ball game. She didn't lose to a lawyer. She lost to a guy with spiral notebook and the patience to use it. And I think that the part was holding on to, because most of the power these bots have, it runs on one thing, the assumption that you won't shake, that you're too tired, too busy, too ready to just let go. Callum wasn't, 44 neighbors wasn't, and you don't have to be either. If your HOA has ever pulled something like this, drop it in the comments. I read everyone. And if this story felt familiar, share it. Someone in your feed needs to see it. Subscribe. The next one's already waiting. Play stupid games, win stupid prize.